Hello and welcome to episode 46 of the Alfa Romeo Driver Podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and with me this afternoon I have Stuart Taylor, the club's 105 model registrar and valuations officer. Good afternoon, Stuart.
Good afternoon, Guy.
So we have a fairly standard way we run through these conversations, and we start with the obvious question for anybody who's involved in Alfas and involved in the club is, how did you get interested in and involved in Alfas in the first place?
Well, it all goes back to 1969 when I was taken to Southgate Odeon and saw the Italian job. And I saw all these fabulous minis being chased by these strange green Italian police cars. I hated the minis, but I really was interested in what the green police cars were. Then that sort of led into holidays in Italy, and kept seeing these very unusual square boxy cars going past our full Cortina estate down the Autostrada. And I just had something that I always wanted to see, always wanted to know what these cars were. And once I've been in employment for a bit and I've got some money behind me, a 2000 GTV Bertone came up fairly locally, and I went and bought that car, which I kept for over 20 odd years. That really got me into 105s, and I'd always hankered after the Giulia Saloon. Of course, at that time, you just could not find a good one. I don't know why. Luckily, through the Aroc classifieds, one came up. Jonathan Trinder had it. It actually was a car that Richard Banks had almost from new, and the Banks boys went to school in, and we managed to pick up that car. We actually shared it. Charles Holden and I purchased the car, and I've had that car now for over 25 years and love it. And that's really what got me into Alfas.
I think I've said on this podcast before, that portrayal of the police Giulias in the Italian job must be one of the most unfair, unrealistic portrayals of a car's performance in cinema history.
Oh, absolutely. The Alfas would have trounced them, wouldn't they? They'd have had them in the first 5 minutes of the chase. But,
and it's the comic bit on the roof where they completely run out of steam and start going backwards because they couldn't go up a slight slope. It's just so that's two. Any other Alfas you've owned?
Well, I've had 72 Alfas in my career.
I think that's the highest number we've had from anybody who could still count them. I think we've had a couple of people who said I've completely lost track.
Yes, I was totaling them up last night. 72, and some were good and some were dreadful, but love them all really in their own various ways. I've had, I suppose, the oldest Alfa I've had is the one I've actually got now, which is the 69 Giulia Super.
Yeah.
Newest Alfa probably was a 156 Sport Wagon.
Okay.
I'm really into classic Alfas rather than the modern cars, to be honest. Hence my interest in the 105 Register, really.
Yeah. So we'll get onto the Register specifically in a minute, but how did you get involved with the club? It sounds though it was probably reasonably early on in your ownership experience.
There was a fantastic article in the Classic and Sports Car at the time featuring the 2000 GTB, which I just acquired, which would have been about 1981. And they had a feature on restoring the Alfas. And John Dooley's garage was featured at Wrestlingworth in Bedfordshire. I went along there to see John and got to know him very well. And he said, "Well, you've got to become a member of the club. You know, there's no ifs or buts. The Aroc is the one thing you've got to do." So I did join, and that was 1981. So member for nearly 40 years.
And I suspect one of hundreds still in the club who were personally invited to join by John.
Well, that's right. John was such a great ambassador for Aroc. I mean, he was one of the original, founding members. He and his father. I'm indebted to him for his sort of time, advice and guidance, really. I mean, his articles on the 105 series in the magazine are fantastic. I mean, he was the sort of chap you could ring up at any time of the day or night. He didn't mind. He'd answer those questions and he'd keep you on the phone for 2 hours, and it was fabulous. I mean, really, such a great guy. We're a great loss for losing him.
And the point about 2-hour phone calls is well made. I think the most awkward 2-hour phone call I had with John was when I stepped out of a 1-hour business meeting to speak to him for 5 minutes and popped my head back round the door halfway through and said, I'll miss the rest of this meeting because I need to take this call. and I didn't need to take the call in any meaningful way, but I wasn't going to end the conversation.
No, absolutely. I mean, John's introduction to Scuderia de Portello and the visits we had down to Arese and meeting the guys down there. I mean, it's just fantastic. I mean, as I say, his knowledge of the cars, and he was thought of so regarded so highly, around the world as Mr. UK Alfa, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the register, how did you get involved in that?
Oh, that was a board meeting in 1995. I probably stuck my hand up at the wrong time. Ed McDonough was looking for somebody to take on the register. Again, I was in love with my 105s, and I thought, yeah, I can do this. That's not a problem. I took it on, got a box. So I've got 3 big boxes of files arrived on my doorstep. They were all in a terrible mess, and I had a couple of months sorting everything out. Now I've got everything in chronological order, and I love just adding new cars and new faces to the register. It's so I find it so interesting to find out where these cars come from. Where the barn finds and things like that. I can spend hours doing it, much to Nicky's disgust.
And presumably with that kind of archive, you're able to trace individual cars through multiple generations of ownership as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've got several there which have gone through like 10 owners in the past. I mean, we're talking 50 years on some of the cars. And that's terrific. I mean, one of the big things that I put out about the register is that if somebody is purchasing or thinking of purchasing a car, we can look back through the register. We can probably provide a service history. We can tell them how many times the car has been restored, who by, how much. It's a tremendous benefit to members who are considering a purchase of a car. And again, another great benefit from Pararok, really.
And it's interesting. I mean, I'm a model registrar as well for a much more modern car. And it's interesting how many different kind of roles registers play depending on how common the car is, how old it is, what kind of racing heritage there is associated with the model. It really is different from register to register. I know Steve Ball has a philosophy with the 155 register of trying to document every car that ever came to the UK, regardless of whether that car was ever, officially registered and owned by a club member. What do you see as the role of the 105 register?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's keeping a record of all the cars that exist in the UK. I mean, unfortunately, there are several. Well, there are probably hundreds out there which aren't on the register, and of course, there are cars coming in from South Africa and Australia, adding to the listings all the time. But it is just keeping a database for the membership, really. And I like to be able to think that we're useful to owners with looking for prospective purchases. You can assist members with difficult parts and things like that, location of that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, and it's just keeping people up to speed with what's going on within the 105 world, which is literally worldwide, which is terrific.
And it's again different to some other model registers. It's quite a broad scope, isn't it? With
Oh, it is.
Julia Saloons and the Bertoni Coupes and the Spiders and
yeah, exactly. I mean, we cover cars from right back from the early Julia Saloons back from 1962 right up to the last Series 4 Spiders of 93. So there's a tremendous span in there. And, of course, all the different variants of model and that sort of thing. The number of different Spiders that are out there is incredible. And just trying to keep pace with those. And whether they're American spec cars or UK or European, there are so many loopholes there. There really are.
Yeah. And obviously one of the things you've talked about with the 105 register is the ability to help people who are buying a particular car with a service history. And that kind of naturally leads on to being able to help establish some kind of envelope for valuation. And I know valuation on 105s is notoriously difficult because of the range of condition and modifications from original, all of those kind of things. But how big a part of the role is valuation, and how did that lead you into the broader valuations role?
it's something probably I just assumed, to be honest. People would come up to you at meetings and say, well, what do you think my car is worth? And I suppose having the hat of the registrar on, you can say, well, I think it's worth this amount of money. I then sort of broadened that by going along to a few of the auctions and keeping track through the classic car magazines. And as I said, I assumed the role, which again I thoroughly enjoy. It's interesting to see how various models have gone up just in the last 5 years in terms of value. It's unfortunate that the saloons are sort of always dragged behind a little bit, but they're catching up to a degree now. But when you think of some 2000 GTVs are now fetching £60,000, which would have been unheard of 20 years ago. But that's the sort of figure that you're looking for a really concourse example.
And obviously, you know 105s inside and out and front to back. How much more challenging is it to provide a valuation for other models, if you're asked?
Well, again, one of the first things that I do is contact the other registrars in the club and put it in front of them and say, well, I've got this car, come forward for evaluation. What do you think it's worth? And get them to have a punt at it as well. Then have a chat with perhaps a couple of the guys we know through the auctions and look at various price guides and things like that. If I'm not sure, I'll always go and visit and have a look at the vehicle. But most of it can be done either on email or from photographs. Which you have to be a little bit careful of, but 9 times out of 10, that's the way I try to do it, and I haven't been caught out too many times so far, so that's good.
and I guess there've probably been some trends over the years that have changed. I think at one point it was almost impossible to sell a larger engined car because nobody wanted 3-litre plus cars and V6s. And now if you look at most Alfa ranges where there's a V6, the V6 is far and away the most desirable car in the range.
Yes, that's true. It's, the 156 V6 Busso engine cars now, they're highly sought after, and there are so few good ones left. And I can see values of those shooting up. I bet I can't really see why the values of a 156 won't go through the roof in a few years' time, because they'll be so few and far between. Which is, they're such a good car, and it's just such a shame that they have those issues, the corrosion issues. But again, get a good one. The value's there.
Get one where they sprayed the underseal on both halves of the chassis, and you should be fine.
Of the chassis, that's correct. not a Monday morning or Friday afternoon car.
Yes, and you have to love those little idiosyncrasies. I think with the with the 939 series cars, the way to luck in and get a good one is to have the factory not fit the under tray properly. Because if it was fitted snugly, then the water collects in the sponge and rots the subframe. But if it was misaligned, it drains out. It's just...
Yes, perfect. Very good Italian engineering. Yes, exactly.
And I guess the other challenge with the valuations is some of them are even seasonal. I know if you look to buy a 939 Spider at the moment, it's probably $3,000 cheaper than it will be in May.
Oh yes, exactly. That follows with all the Spiders and to a degree the Platonis, because they're all tucked away for the winter now. Yes, certainly it is a very seasonal thing. But if somebody wants a car, we will get out there and search for it, and they are there. And that again, people come onto the register and say, look, I'm thinking of selling a car. Can you put the word out or just keep a note of it? And we forwarded several cars to prospective owners that way. And again, it's another good benefit of being a member of the club, And I try and pick up on the Facebook page anybody who says that they're looking for a particular car. I can usually, put them towards somebody who's selling a car or maybe selling a car, who've made noises about selling a car. We can usually do that for them, which is a great feature, really.
And I guess there's a couple of different reasons why people ask for valuations, and the other obvious one is insurance. How receptive are the various insurance companies and brokers to club valuations when they've maybe undervalued a car themselves.
Yeah, that's true. We have a very good relationship with Chris Knott. They will basically accept anything, not everything, but the majority of the values that I will send to them on the cars. It doesn't work quite so much with some of the other classic car insurers. But again, I'll have a chat. If they have a problem, I'll have a chat with them, and we can usually work something out for them. We've had a chat just recently. You had had three beautiful cars. They were in an underground garage, and the garage was flooded out. He wasn't an insurer. He hadn't insured his cars through Chris Knott, but again, we assisted him to get the insurance cover sorted out. And again, it's another little service that we try and do for the members.
Yeah, just going back to 105s, we had James Browning on the podcast recently, who's responsible for the new Giulia GTA-M, and obviously the GTA and the GTA-M are a big part of the kind of aura and mystique around the 105.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on GTA and GTA-M replicas? I guess both from the point of view of the cars that we end up with, but also the cars that we lose. It's quite difficult to find a GT Junior these days because they've all become GTA replicas.
That's true. I mean, there's been a lot of the early Sprint GTs and Sprint GTVs have been converted over to GTA replicas, mainly because of the step fronts look of them.
Yeah,
it's a great shame. Those cars have gone forever now, and some have been made into really good examples of GTA replicas. Some look hideous, I think. I would rather the cars stayed as they were, but again, that's up to the owner's choice, really. I'd rather see some of the earlier cars, and as you say, they are getting fewer and far between, and it's a great shame. But then again, some of the restorers and specialists have made some really good examples of these GTA replicas, and it'd be a lovely car to own, to be honest.
Yeah, and on the one hand, the rarity of the GTAs and the GTA-Ms is part of what makes them special. On the other hand, the base car is so close to that in potential that you can see why people would want to add another one to the to the list of replicas. And I guess with things like that, you talked about the Banks brothers earlier on.
Yes,
their cars are in a different league and objectively in some areas better than the originals.
Oh, I think definitely. You only had to see that Chris Harris driving the car on one of the GTAR on Top Gear to see what an amazing machine that is. It's so highly modified compared to the standard GTA. I mean, it would run rings around it, to be honest. But great. I mean, if you've got £300,000 to spare, then why not? I'd love one.
Yeah, and I guess from a historic perspective, it's probably better that Alfaholics are doing that to cars that weren't GTAs than that they're making the same kind of improvements to a real GTA. And I know they do. They do work on FIA spec race cars as well.
Yes.
If something's going to be modded to be a GTA R290, I'd probably rather it hadn't been an original GTA Junior.
Yes, I quite agree. Yes, I quite agree. It's two ends of the spectrum, isn't it? Really, you either have the lightly modified cars, or you go the Alfaholics route and just have tick every box on the sheet, really.
Yeah, one of the highlights of the NEC show, I think you couldn't go, unfortunately.
No, I was down with COVID, unfortunately. I was really upset about that, but there we are.
But what was nice there was to see Richard Norris's GTA and the GTA-R flanking the new GTA-M and just being able to compare Richard's beautiful, genuine GTA with the Alfaholics car.
Yes, indeed.
It's really nice to see them side by side because you rarely get to see.
Yeah, as a comparison, they're fantastic. I mean, Richard Norris's car is just, well, yes, it's on my Christmas list every year.
And Richard only came up on the Sunday. I didn't get a chance to talk to him in person, but without being indiscreet, what kind of value do you think that car is compared to the 300k 290R that was next to it?
Well, it's going to be up in the 150, 170, 175,000. It's got to be. the originality and everything of it. It's just that sort of price, I think. I wouldn't like to do a valuation on it, to be honest, but
yeah. Interesting that there's huge reaction from the press about the modern GTA M and the price of it.
Yes.
And of the 3 GTAs at that end of the stand, it was by far the cheapest.
Yes, exactly.
Well, not by far is probably an exaggeration.
No, I like the way Alfa sort of reinvent themselves with that sort of thing, but I don't know. Where are they going to go? Where are they going to go in the future? I can't. If the Giulia does get changed into an electric car, what's going to happen? Are they going to have a GTA version of that? I don't see it really. But,
well, I guess unlike some other manufacturers where the emphasis on the performance models has been more on power than weight, I guess there's still a kind of logic to an Alleggerita version of an electric car.
Yeah.
So you can still say, the performance version is a higher performance because we've used a higher density battery and, carbon and whatever and got the weight down. So I suppose it's consistent.
So. Yeah, I suppose so. I've not really thought about it that way, but I suppose why not? Yeah, sure.
And it was nice to see the authentic, the tribute liveries that they made available with the GTA and GTA M, harking back to the 105 racing liveries. I couldn't get a solid answer from James about how many people have actually ordered cars with the race liveries, but it was a nice touch.
Oh right, okay. I've not seen that. I'll have to keep an eye out. Is that going to be in the next magazine?
We talk about them in the magazine. We haven't actually got any pictures of the liveries, but they did. You could order your GTA or GTA M in red with an ochre front flash or a white front flash, or you could have a tricolor stripe down the roof, or there were about five different liveries which were all inspired by touring car racers of the period.
Okay, the 1960s. Yeah. Okay. Well, interesting. I've not picked up on that.
Yeah, I've not seen one in the flesh, and apparently they had 7 originally and ended up only doing 5 because 2 of them would have been too difficult to do well in the production process. And apparently some people have ordered them. So it'll be nice to see when the first ones of those roll out.
Yes, it will.
On a 105 base mod of a different kind. I don't know if you saw the Ansted 158 replica.
Yes, I did. I did follow that on TV. Yes, it's very, very, very good. Yes. Because he came on the stand, didn't he? I understand.
He did come on the stand, yeah. Yeah, we're gonna have him on a podcast at some point. We were going to do a live podcast with him at the show, but he was just so in demand that we couldn't get an hour of his time during the day, which was probably a bit ambitious in the first place. But
okay,
but that's a car that in the TV show was based around a 105 Spider drivetrain.
Yes.
And is now based on an MX-5.
Okay.
And there's, again, I'm in two minds about that. On the one hand, it's lost a lot of its alphaness, although there wasn't really much connection between the 105 and the Alfetta. But on the other hand, I'd almost rather people were ruining an MX-5 to make a kit car.
Too right. Yes, I quite agree. Well, what sort of money would that run out at then? Did you?
The basic kit, I think, everything you need to make one ready to go is about 25 grand plus the cost of an MX-5, which I think for the relevant MX-5 is only about 2 or 3 grand. So for under 30k, you have everything you need to build one yourself.
Right. Okay. Oh well, horses for courses, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And it gets the word out and the thing about Alfa, then that's not a bad thing.
Yes, and a lot of the photos and things have featured heavily the Cloverleaf badge and talked about the 158's heritage, which is all good for the mark. And it's only really when you see the two side by side that you realise how compromised the replica is by the components underneath it. So it's a lot wider than a Tipo 158 because the front subframe from an MX-5 is a lot wider than a 158 was.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, well, there we are. I'm just trying to think what else I can tell you about the 105 register. I mean, there are other models, of course, in the Alfa ranges that have 105 prefixes, which is this is the anorak time, of course. The Montreal has a 105 prefix, as does the Junior Zagato.
Yes.
The AR12 van uses a lot of 105 components. We've never actually had an A12 van actually on the register, but I'm looking forward to the first one that I do get. They must have been incredibly underpowered when you think they only had the 1300 cc engine in it. When you saw some of those going up some of the mountain passes in Italy, you just wonder how they ever made it to the top. But
yeah, I mean, it's probably typical of its time. The little comma vans and things.
Yes, exactly.
Were probably only 1300, 1600 engines anyway.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I mean, James Wheeler had the Transporter, which he had restored, and that was terrific. But he said it was so deathly underpowered. Once he had something in the back, it was a nightmare. But
well, and of course they're even rarer. So the idea of putting a 2-litre twin spark into one of those
yes, exactly.
To make it more drivable is probably even more sacrilegious than it is putting it into a
Tony Coupe. Yes, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But again, keep going back to the register. I mean, I keep tabs with a lot of the guys over in Holland, with the Dutch club Scarb. Talking to a lot of the chaps in Germany and Belgium and in France. We keep up to speed with what's happening in the 105 world. Once we get over these pandemics, I think we would love to do an international 105 day somewhere, or maybe weekend.
Yeah.
It's been muted somewhere, possibly at the Nürburgring. We could do something there, or maybe at the Spa 6 Hours meeting in Belgium, which will be a good location. And I know the Dutch are well up for doing something like that. But of course,
it'd be a nice thing to do for the club's 60th anniversary.
Well, yes, that's right. I mean, I've got to start writing as well, because it's the 60th anniversary of the Julius Saloon next year. So we've got to get writing an article all about that, I suppose.
Yes, please. That would be much appreciated. and you talk about the community, and it really is, isn't it? I mean, the remarkable thing, we don't have perfect records of what our members own, but from surveys and historically, it's run at up to about 2/3 of the membership had a 105, albeit they may have had other cars as well. And I think it's probably still at somewhere around the 50% mark, which for a car that is 55, pushing 60 years old, for the early examples, it's really quite remarkable.
It is. I mean, it just shows how good, what a good car they were. They were so far. I mean, certainly with the saloon, and I keep harking back to the saloon, but I mean, they were so far ahead of their time back in 1962. I mean, when you think people were riding around in Auntie Rovers and things like that, which were comparable. There's the 105 saloon, which had a 0.30 CD coefficient. I mean, it was designed by the wind and at a rate in the wind tunnels. And what a great car that is.
Well, I think I'm right in saying, I could be wrong, but I think I'm right in saying that in terms of production saloon cars, that wasn't bettered until the Audi 100, which only got to 0.29.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, I've read that same article. Again, if you look at the Julius Saloon, then it looks odd in certain views. But I mean, the scallop boot lid was done that way so that it would stay in a straight line down the autostrada at high speed. A lot of the trim work around the windscreen and along the sides of the body, it was all done for streamlining, and it works. It works. I mean, I've driven mine at 100 miles an hour in Germany, and it's as good, it's as solid as a rock. For a 50-year-old car, amazing, absolutely amazing.
So you've talked about celebrating the 60th anniversary next year.
Yes, that's right.
Any other plans to do things either differently with the way the registers run, or in terms of other things that you can do for register members in the short to medium term?
Something that I find disappointing is the lack of feedback you get from members. You don't. I'd like to put on a lot more shows in the UK, but we don't seem to get the responses back from people. Obviously next year, National Alfa Day, it would be fantastic to have as many 105 saloons as we can possibly get together. But I know from just trying to get a couple of years ago for the celebration of the 1750 GTV, it was a real struggle to get people to come along and bring their cars. And whether that's the fact that they are becoming so valuable, people don't want to use them. I don't know. I've always thought that if you have an Alfa, you should be out there and driving it. But they are so valuable, people don't want to get in the wet or get stone chips and this sort of thing. And they'd rather have them in the garage and polish it. But there we are.
And I know that's Carol Corliss's biggest frustration running the pre-war register is that the proportion of those cars that are now owned by collectors who have very little intention to ever drive them. It is a real frustration. You think the price she paid for her supercharged 1750 was quite remarkable, but some of the prices that people paid for 105 series cars when they were at their low point.
Yes, that's right.
And what they're worth now, it is a very different owner profile. Albeit you've got people like you and people like Jonathan Griffin in the club who have owned those cars for a long time now and bought them relatively cheap.
Yes, that's right.
And have ended up with something valuable. But there is a big kind of collector element to the
Yes, there is.
To the model now.
They're like pieces of art, really, aren't they? They're not to be used, just admired, I think, really. But that's not the way I look at it, really. You should be out there using them. There we are, again, horses for courses. And that's what people want to do,
Yeah. One of the things that we discussed at the recent section secretaries and registrars meeting was other things that registers in general, not the 105 register in particular, can do. Perhaps learning from some of the lessons of COVID and getting around the fact that people, it is difficult for a single model to get together physically.
Yes.
To maybe start doing some virtual things and having a regular Zoom meeting between events so that people can talk about their cars, swap tips, and build that community without having to take them out of the carcoon and get them wet.
I think that's a really good thing to suggest. Actually, I mean, a Zoom meeting for all the 105 members to get together and, as you say, to talk about their cars, the restorations they're having done. It all helps with the ownership of a particular vehicle. Some people feel a bit lost and they don't know where to go and who to ask. And if you can ask the community, then that's got to be a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe that's something I'll have a go at next year with the 105s and with some help from the guys in the club who are up to speed with these things. We can set that up and do it.
Nick's always happy to set up and join a Zoom meeting.
All right. Well, we shall look forward to doing that in the new year then.
No, that would be good.
Okay.
Anything else that we haven't talked about that you think we should or you'd like to talk about?
I'm disappointed the way some of the sections operate within the club. I mean, I've been as a member for a long time, and we used to get a lot of people along to our Hearts and South Beds gatherings, and then we do struggle now. Although we put on a very good program of events and meetings and things like that, it's really the same old people that we see every time. And to me, being a member of the club is it's interaction with other members. Having a chat with somebody over a pint, going out and looking at people's cars. It's all part of being a member. Again, I can't understand why people don't interact more. They'll join the club. Maybe it's just for perhaps the insurance side, maybe for evaluation. But being a member of the club is getting involved and socialising. I'm surprised that more people don't do it.
Yeah, it's something that we talked about at the meeting in Coventry, and it does vary enormously. I know I joined the club in the late 80s and never in my first period of membership when I lived in Kent, never had any interaction with the section at all because I was getting what I wanted from the big events and the magazine.
Yes.
And then when I moved to Berkshire, it took me a long time to get involved in the section. And I, probably one of my biggest regrets in life, and it's not that big a regret, I try not to have too many, but is that I didn't get involved in that kind of thing earlier.
Yeah, sure.
the sections are, such a huge part of what the club does.
Yes.
And you look at, and I always reluctant to massage our chairman's ego too much, because we do a lot of it, and he deserves it, unfortunately. But you look at the East Midlands section, and the numbers they get along to meetings and the events they run are an example to the whole of the rest of the country. And it's how we not quite replicate that, because I think what they do in East Midlands works in the East Midlands and isn't necessarily the right thing to do everywhere. No. But it's how do we figure out what is the right, not just mix of events, but how do we get people along to those events to realise how good they are?
You couldn't have a better section secretary than John Griffiths. I mean, he is just so if you cut him in half, he'd bleed Alfa Romeo all the way through, wouldn't he? But yeah, he is so enthusiastic for the cars and the club, and the great thing about him is, as should be with any section secretary, you get a new member arriving at a section meeting, it's your job to go up and welcome them and buy them a beer, and then introduce them to other members in the section, get them talking to people.
Yeah, but that's been fascinating, Stuart. Thanks for taking the time.
Well, thank you.
Well, that's just about all we have time for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time on Sunday the 19th of December, when I'll be speaking to Mike Stark, pilot of the magnificent 3.8-litre 156 GTA hill climb car, which featured at National Alfa Day and on the club stand at the recent NEC Classic Motor Show. We'll be talking about the car and its history, as well as how you could get started in hill climbing. Episode 47 will be available to download from Amazon Music, iTunes, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Podcast Addict, and everywhere else good podcasts are found. Until then, stay safe.